Hi, today our conversation is on traumatic deaths. As you know, we've been talking about death and dying and the concerns we might have around it or the tools we might hope to have. Today we're talking about traumatic deaths and some of the things that we want to be aware of when we perhaps may find ourselves having experienced a traumatic death. How can we handle it? Or perhaps we're working with someone who has died traumatically. We're still aware of or concerned about their well-being. We talk about this not to create more fear around traumatic deaths, not to add more trauma, but to decrease the fear, to bring in more education. This helps our hearts, this helps our minds, and hopefully this helps the one we're working with or even ourselves. Traumatic deaths are problematic in that there's no time oftentimes for realizing that you're dying or realizing that you've died. It's a sudden car accident, it's a sudden drowning accident, it's a sudden battlefield accident. Somehow or other, where one moment you're alive and the next moment you're gone. What do you do? There's a disorientation that can happen. There's a confusion that can happen. There even can be so much fear that there's a clinging. What can I hold on to? Where am I? What's gone on? And so the individual who has died traumatically, who has at least left their body, they haven't moved on, but they've left their body, is still trying to get some kind of orientation to what has happened. This is very concerning. In that fear and in that clinging, they may, just like a child would who's frightened and doesn't know where they are, what do? You go to the most familiar place or the most familiar person or the most familiar setting to make yourself feel comfortable. And this often happens with people who are experiencing a traumatic death and aren't getting oriented to their next steps. Instead of being oriented to the next steps in the afterlife, they're still oriented to the earth and this life, and it's very understandable. So what we want is to just know this process. What can happen is in that clinging, in that fear of suddenly not having your body anymore and nobody's listening to you, you're trying to communicate, nobody can hear you. You start trying to hold on to what's familiar. That could be a person. You could hold on to a person that's familiar. That could be a place. It could be the place that you've died. You're kind of stuck there. So we have this thing that we call getting stuck, where you can get stuck at the place of trauma. This is not unlike what happens for people during life and have a traumatic experience in life. What we find is there's this stuckness. Anything that even resembles something close to what that early trauma was about triggers the same emotion, triggers the same fear, and they're kind of stuck in that trauma for that time. When we die traumatically, we can still have that experience of being stuck. So as we go along in our conversations, we're going to talk more about what you can do if you find that that has happened for yourself, you've had a traumatic death, or you're helping someone else. I would say a great deal of the time people who die traumatically become oriented eventually and maybe very quickly. Not everybody has the full-blown trauma experience of it. Many people, it is sudden, it is surprising, it is confusing if they get reoriented. Suddenly realize, oh, I'm not in that body anymore, and they may even say, thank goodness. You know, it's kind of a good experience. I feel lighter, I feel blessed, I feel ready for the next steps. And so they turn away from earth life. They turn away saying goodbye. Maybe they take some time to say goodbye. And then they find that there's somebody there nearby to help them. There's a guide. There's an escort, I call them, heavenly escorts or celestial escorts, We have people who are there to help us cross on over, and they have that quick or sudden or traumatic death, but they turn and they become moving into their next steps, and it's fine. What we're talking about is various things that can happen with traumatic deaths. I hope this has been helpful for you. We'll talk more. Thank you.